Hey everybody, and welcome to our beginner beekeeping workshop. We are so glad you guys decided to join us. We have a lot of fun in these classes. So a little bit about the class. We have 4 different sessions. So 2 of them are pre-recorded and you can sit through and watch them at your leisure. And then we're going to go live after that, and we're going to do question and answer, and it's really cool because you get to interact with us live.
That's right. The class, the whole course is really for those, for 2 groups of people: those that are thinking of taking up beekeeping. So is beekeeping really for me? And for those who have been keeping bees for a little while but have been having a bit of trouble, and they want to review and see what sort of things they might be doing wrong. And this will be a big help for those folks too. And the other bit of news is that there'll be a prize drawing at the end of the second live session. So stick with it and go through all the sessions. You'll be able to see them either as they're aired, or you'll be able to watch them as live but recorded for about 2 weeks after this time. So you'll get plenty of opportunity to see them and review them again and again.
And as you have questions, you can put them right in the comments, and we'll do our best to answer them.
That's right. We'll answer them the day we see them, and we'll also be answering them in the question and answer session if we don't manage to get to everything through that in that time.
Right.
And likewise, if our previous classes that we've done like this are anything to go by, we'll get a lot of questions.
Yes.
And so if you don't get them in during the live session, you will get them shortly thereafter, but they'll all follow in the comments down below.
Right.
So without any further ado, let's get started.
Let's get into it.
A little bit about ourselves. I'm Peter Cowan, aka the Bee Whisperer. I've been keeping bees since I was about 11. As a hobbyist beekeeper until maybe 12, 15 years ago, and with 3 or 4 hives, and now it's gradually grown and grown and grown. So now in the spring I may have over 300 or 400 colonies. I've been teaching beekeeping for the last decade or so, and in the last decade I've probably taught more than 3,000 students, introduced them to beekeeping. So now I have a beekeeping supply store. I sell bees, I sell honey and other products. And in fact, one of my star students is Amy.
I wouldn't say star student, but probably star stalker from the beginning. So my name's Amy Nickerson, also known as the Queen Bee. And I've been keeping bees for about 10 years. And I learned from Peter. And it's still new enough in my mind that I still have in the back of my brain, I remember exactly what it was like to be that new beekeeper and take some classes and then promptly forget everything that I learned and panicked. And there's no need to panic. I said, all you need is a mentor. And Peter became my mentor and my friend, and here we are today. So what I do, I'm a hobbyist beekeeper. So I maintain anywhere from 5 to 10 hives, give or take. And I have half of my hives are in an urban, right in the city. I have a backyard, a fenced-in backyard. My neighbors don't even know I have them there. And I also keep about 5 or 6 hives out in the country as well. So I get a little taste of both urban and rural beekeeping. But I took Peter's class. I don't know why. I was terrified of bees, but I have a super high-stress job, and I definitely needed a hobby. Once I took his classes, I immediately became hooked, and now I'm absolutely obsessed with bees. And I'm sure that once you get started and you get knowing what you're doing, you're going to be the same way. It is definitely an obsessive hobby, and it's a lot of fun. So first, just a little bit about what Beekeeping 24/7 is. Beekeeping 24/7 is an online educational and mentoring group. What we do is we've got members from all over the United States. It's a paid membership, and what we do is we mentor them and help them with their bees. They may have questions or not even sure if they want to get started into bees, and what they do is they bring those questions to us. Now, what started this whole thing was Peter and I are members of a lot of the online groups that are out there. There's the Facebook groups, and there's a lot of YouTube videos and stuff out there. So much information out there, so much, and it can be really, really confusing. Different methods of beekeeping. One method saying this is not right, and we ran into a lot of negativity.
Yeah, particularly with the open forum style of advice on groups. it was it'd be very hard for a new beekeeper. I very often see a beekeeper being pulled in one direction, then pointed in another direction, and pulled in another direction, and you just know that's just leading to trouble. Whereas if they had a consistent one method that worked very well and just keep it simple, then they're going to be far more successful. And we came up with the idea of beekeeping 24/7, which is basically Amy and I can basically hold your hand through the process of beekeeping, as well as having 12 really good quality beekeeping classes in there. We've also added maybe another 40 odd videos of training videos in response to questions from our members. And so that's the background to beekeeping 24/7. This workshop is to give you a little bit of a taste of what we do there and go through basically the basics. See, is this beekeeping for you?
All right, we're talking about bees here. And there's this one little thing I want to say about bees. And this is coming from my extreme bee phobia that I had before I got started in this. Pretty much anything that buzzes or stings, everybody calls a bee. And that's just not the case. There are hornets and there are wasps, and they're just downright nasty. A honeybee is a honeybee, and they're not downright nasty. They're actually quite calm, and they don't want to sting you, as opposed to hornets who just like to sting you because they can. Let's just get that out of the way. That's the disclaimer about the bee, because everybody says, oh, it's a bee, and I'm like, that's not a bee, that's a hornet.
Yeah, so you'll be correcting people left, right, and center here.
Right.
Okay, but all colonial bees, the honeybee now we're going to be talking about specifically. The colony of a honeybee is really a super organism. Yeah. It's a colony that might be made up of between 10,000, maybe up to 100,000 individuals. And those individuals are made up of different castes of bee. There are 3 different castes of bee, starting with the queen.
The queen bee. Not me, of course, but I'm going to talk about the actual queen bee. She's the mother of all the bees in the hive, and she's the only fertile bee in the hive, so she lays all the eggs, and she can lay up to 3,000 eggs a day.
That's actually more than her own body weight in eggs in a single day.
It is. She looks different than the other bees. Her body, her abdomen is larger. And it's pretty much the test of the beekeeper, especially the new beekeeper, to find her each time you go in and look. But she does look different. She also gives out pheromones, which is what binds the colony together, and it makes them like just a super organism. They have one purpose, one mind. It's quite amazing, and the queen bee binds them all together.
One of the difficulties people have with beekeeping is actually finding the queen bee. And you may notice in this video of the queen walking around on the comb that she sort of walks more purposefully than it seems that the workers do. Workers seem to be more random. They're not, but they appear more random. The queen has more of a purposeful movement across the comb, as well as being bigger. And you may also notice that as she passes through the crowd of bees, it sort of leaves a wake or a trail of empty space behind her, as it takes a little while for the other bees to fill in the gaps behind her. That's one of the key ways of finding a queen bee in the hive.
And as you can see, as she's walking over these cells, she's actually peering into these, what are called cells on the frame. She's actually looking for a place to lay some eggs.
Yes, and so the other way of really helping find the queen bee is looking on the right comb. So the queen, you're not likely to find the queen on a comb full of honey, and you're not likely to find a queen bee on a comb that's just foundation and only just being built comb. You're looking for the queen in a space where there's lots of room to lay eggs, open cells to lay eggs.
All right, let's move on to the worker bee.
Now, the worker bee makes up the vast majority of bees in the hive. She's also female, but she's infertile. She's smaller than the queen bee, but right from the start of when she's born, as she emerges from the cell, her first role right away is to start cleaning the cell that she was in and the surrounding cells, and also starting to produce a substance called royal jelly, which is a highly nutritious product, high protein food source for other bees. And this comes from a little gland in her forehead called the hypopharyngeal gland. And she produces this royal jelly, and she starts feeding her sister larvae. who are a few weeks yet less old than she is. And so you'll see the eggs that she's checking on but doing very little with. And then you've got larvae as they're getting bigger, and these are sister worker bees. And you'll see this little pool of royal jelly. It looks kind of like they're sitting in a bath of milk. And the larva grows in there, and the worker bee is feeding them constantly. In fact, worker bees are tending to these larvae about 1,100 times per day. As the worker bee grows and gets a few days older, she will start to be doing other roles, things like building comb when she's about 10 to 12 days old, being a guard bee, receiving food and other products, pollen, nectar, water from field bees as she brings, and she will bring them around from the field bee and move them and store them in the hive, process that food, fanning air through the hive to dry off the nectar. Things like temperature control, she can generate heat. As she gets older still, she then becomes, at about 3 weeks old, she will start to become a field bee. So she'll start to do little orientation flights. And you'll see clouds of bees flying around the hive for about 10 or 15 minutes in an afternoon as she gets her bearings and learns where the hive is. And from that point on, she's permanently now a field bee. And she may only live another 4 or 5 weeks before she'll work herself to death. So worker bee lives a relatively short period of time, whereas a queen bee could have lived for 2 or 3 years.
Yeah. All right, now let's talk about the boys, the drone.
The drones. Quite impressive bees. There's about 400 or 500 large drones in the hive. They're male bees. And a lot of people don't give them really a fair crack of the whip, really, because they think that they're lazy.
Yeah. So yeah, they lay around, they eat, they try and find a virgin queen to go mate, and then they come back and they eat. If there were couches in a hive, they'd be on them.
That's not true. That's not true. Drones spend all of their time during the summer months flying, and this is, I take the side of the drones. I had 3 sisters. So the drones spend every day flying around looking for queen bees to mate with, virgin queens on their mating flight. The queen bee, we should have mentioned this earlier on, the queen bee only mates once in one day in her lifetime when she's on her mating flight, and she may mate with 10 or 20 drones during that time. And the poor drone, if he does manage to find a queen to mate with, his reproductive organs virtually explode and he drops down dead.
There's worse ways to go, I guess.
I suppose so. And then as the drone lives through the summer, this is basically the inexpensive way that bees can spread their genes to other colonies by raising drones. It doesn't take much for them to raise some drone bees. When it comes to the fall, there's no more queens out there on mating flights, and so then it's basically they kick out their brothers, these drones who no longer have females to mate with, so basically they get kicked out of the hive to starve to death.
And the eviction process actually is fascinating to watch at times. If you're standing there watching your bees go in and out of the hive, like I do, you literally see them getting dragged out of the hive and then blocked from coming back in. They won't let them back in.
Yeah, so the poor old drone, if he is successful in mating, he dies in the process. When he's not, he's kicked out by his sisters because they consider it's much cheaper to grow new drones next year than to feed these poor guys through the whole winter time.
Now the drones too, they look different than the other bees as well.
Yeah.
I mean, they're larger than your worker bee, and a lot of people will mistake a drone for a queen sometimes because it is larger than the other bee. All right, so now let's get on to the hive, the places where all of our lovely ladies live. So bees are always looking for a hollow space to live, and there's several different types of hives. Now, there are wild bees that are looking for, they may nest and have a colony in a hollow tree. You never know, in pretty much any hollow space, though.
It was in the mid-1800s where the movable frame hive was invented, and we use what's called the Langstroth hive, and it is by far and away the most common in the world now. It's basically, the bees are encouraged to build their combs on frames so that all the combs can be moved around and put back together without destroying the colony, which a freestyle constructions type of thing would have involved. So we'll start off with the Langstroth hive. Here's the bottom board. Basically, it's a framework that the bee boxes can go on. In this particular case, it's called a screen bottom board. It would be useful in controlling some of the things of controlling parasitic mites, but it can also be used to help reduce temperature in the hive if required.
And there's also a solid bottom board, so there's screen and solid, so it's whichever you prefer.
That's right. And but the screen bottom board
Yeah.
tends to have a little fewer mites in them. We'll come back and talk about mites a little bit later. What goes on top of this would be what we call supers or boxes. These deep ones at the bottom have multiple names. They may be called hive bodies, deep supers, deeps, all sorts of different names to them. But basically all the principles are the same, just the depth of them varies a little bit. Down at the bottom, we will tend to call this the brood chamber, the area where most of the bees are and where the queen is laying eggs. Each super contains, in this case, 10 frames. And in those 10 frames, there's also a sheet of foundation. This is what the bees will build their combs on. In this particular case, I'm using black plastic foundation. I like black plastic foundation because you can see eggs on them.
And the older you get, the easier that is to see on
The
black
more
foundation.
helpful that is as your eyes get older.
Yeah.
Here's a frame where the bees are starting to build the comb on it. They've only built comb here. We call that process drawing out the comb. A little bit on both sides here. As the more bees put more wax on there, they will eventually completely build out the comb. This is called a fully drawn comb. And so there's cells on both sides of the frame, and almost all of these cells are small cells. We call those worker cells. And the bees will do their entire life cycle here. Basically, they will raise their young, they'll store their food, they'll do their little dances, all sorts of things. This is the main furniture of the house itself. As the colony grows, they will only occupy as much space as they have bees in there to keep it warm. When the bees initially start to occupy this box, they may only occupy 5 combs. So there may only be bees on these 5 frames. They can only build comb out to that space because beyond that it's too cold. They can't keep it warm. But as they raise more young and that young emerges into adult bees, now there's enough bees to cover more frames and more frames. And as they get higher in population, they can build more and more combs. We will feed the bees. Let's show a feeder on there. In fact, we'll feed the bees. In this case, we'll use sugar syrup. This is a 2-quart entrance feeder, which we will put in the entrance of the hive. As you turn that up, it'll fill this little well here with sugar syrup, and that will go into the entrance of the hive, leaving the bees more room to get in and out beside it there. Let's say we're a few weeks on and the bees are starting to increase in number now. It takes 3 weeks from the time the queen starts to lay an egg till the time it emerges as an adult bee. And so after 3 weeks, the population is starting to grow. When we've got them working on, say, 8 out of 10 combs, it's time to put the next box on. We always want to keep ahead of them in terms of always give them extra space before they run out of space. We don't want the bees to become crowded. So up here, these happen to be plastic frames, again, with foundation, and the bees will now, the heat from the cluster below will warm these frames up. They will actually occupy this super really fast as it's warm and it's nice and warm, and they will build these frames very quickly, and within 2, maybe 3 weeks, they will have this box complete. And this all assumes that you have plenty of food, you're giving them plenty of sugar syrup, or we have plenty of flow of nectar from the surrounding area. But you can supplement it with sugar like this.
The sugar not only feeds the bees as this colony is growing, but it also helps them to build wax. They need that food to help build the wax to make the cells so the queen can lay.
Absolutely, absolutely. The if there's no food coming into the hive, they won't build any wax at all. So normally this will come from nature, lots of flow of nectar, which we call a honey flow, and we'll talk about that later. But we can make that extra strong flow of nectar by feeding them sugar syrup, and we usually feed them sugar syrup until they've built the comb in this box and the comb in this box. And that's typically going to take, depending on how we stock the colony with bees, between 4 weeks and 6 to 8 weeks, depending on how we stocked it. And we'll talk about how we stock the bees later. If the flow of nectar continues, and here in Maine, the flow of nectar may continue right till mid or end of July, we might put more space on as they occupy this and the population has grown. We'll put another box on. Now we're talking about storing surplus honey.
And this is when we'd use a piece of equipment which is called a queen excluder.
That is if we're going to use a queen excluder, because we don't always use one.
Correct. So here's a queen excluder. As you can see, it's a grate. They come in metal and plastic. It goes on top of our upper brood chamber. And what this does is this just prevents the queen from going up into any boxes we put on top. Keeps her down in the brood chamber. She's a little bit too big to fit through the grapes.
The grapes. I love it when she makes mistakes. The grate.
The grates. She can't fit up through. She's a little bit too big. But all of the worker bees can pass through this grate with no problem. And we'd only use grapes if we were making wine, but we're not making wine. We're talking about honey. So let's take this off.
So we will put an additional box on, and we may continue to put additional boxes on. This is a shallower box. This is called a medium super. And the reason that we use smaller boxes for storage of honey is because a box full of honey is heavy.
Heavy.
Heavy, heavy, heavy.
Very heavy.
And so this itself might weigh 35 to 40 pounds of honey. And so we can put even shallower ones on, which may only hold 25 pounds of honey. But basically, let's assume that our bees get to a point where they've occupied and they're storing the honey in this box. They'll be storing honey here as well. But what will they be doing is there'll be a mixture of larvae and bees and brood and honey stored down here. And further up the hive, they tend to just store honey. So this box will be full of honey, and this is the honey that we can take off to keep for ourselves.
So as this progresses, okay, each time, so we're going to start with the lower box, the lower brood chamber. We're going to put these covers on as well, so they're not always open on the top.
That's right.
But so
just to show you what it would be like, this would be completed with an inner cover here, which usually has a notch on one side. It has a rebated side on the other. And here, we'll put that on the top. And this is the telescopic cover, which will shelter it from weather, rain, that sort of thing. So this is a completed hive with 2 stories, which we might consider the brood chamber, and a honey super on the top, bottom board, inner cover, and telescopic cover. This sort of setup will probably cost you approximately $250 to $300, depending on the place that you buy them from.
So this was the Langstroth hive, and this is primarily the one that Peter and I use. We find it to be quite effective. The other types of hives that are out there, there's a top bar hive, which is basically a long box and it's elevated up on legs. There's one called an AZ hive, and it's basically hives built into a little shed.
Yeah,
very neat, very complicated.
Yeah, inside the shed, there's a glass wall, so you can look inside. So not necessarily for the beginner by any means.
No, or even people who've been keeping. It's difficult, but it's fascinating as well. It's fascinating as well. And then there's the infamous flow hive.
Oh, right.
And flow hives, neither of us have a flow hive. We plan on doing a little experiment with beekeeping 24/7 in the future with one of those. But again, in our personal opinion, it's not one for the beginner beekeeper. There's different things you need to know about behaviors.
Yeah,
and
it's an interesting style hive where you can just turn a tap for the honey to come out. But basically, I don't know anyone who started with a flow hive that hasn't had their bees be overcrowded and swarm in their first year.
Right.
But we're going to have some go with a flow hive in the future and show people how they can be managed.
So again, Langstroth, and that's what we're the method that we're teaching.
You can also get Langstroth in 8-frame hives, so in other words, a smaller version of this. If weight is an issue for you, an 8-frame hive could be done. Also, there's nothing forcing you to use only deep boxes for brood chambers. You can use all those medium-sized supers, so again, keeping the weight down. These boxes are all interchangeable. It's just that most people will use a deep box or 2 deep boxes for their brood chamber area and smaller boxes for the honey storage. Let's talk about now protective gear and tools of the trade. Starting with the simplest, it would be something like a veil and helmet combination to keep the bees off your face, and a good pair of gloves. These gloves are ventilated on the sleeve. They're made of goat skin, so they're thick enough to avoid almost all bee stings, but they're fine enough that you can feel everything through it. The other thing is, in terms of protective gear, is you can really just go right up the scale in terms of just to suit your own comfort level with the bees. A lot of folks are perfectly happy with just keeping the bees and making sure they don't get stung on the hands and the face, but you'll be surprised just how gentle the bees are anyway. And so you may feel more comfortable with a veil jacket combination. So something like this covers your torso and it zips up so that there's no way bees are getting in by not tying down your veil properly. You may go to the full extent of a full bee suit with to cover you more or less from head to toe. And so basically it just depends on your level of comfort with the bees and to what extent you intend to rile them up. Basically, we will be teaching you how not to rile up your bees, but if you're more of a professional beekeeper like me and you've got hundreds of hives that you've got to get through, you end up riling your bees. So I wear a full bee suit all the time. There's no shame in not wanting to get stung, so wear what makes you feel comfortable.
So I have different levels. I have all of these things, and a lot of it depends on the temperament of my bees when I go out to the bee yard.
The weather dictates how the bees are going to behave, and with a little bit of experience, you'll see that on some days, if you go out there, you won't need any protective gear. And on other days, you want to wear your full suit because sometimes the bees are ultra defensive. Rarely, but sometimes. So it's best to be prepared. You don't need the whole range as having the full bee suit all the time. It's the simplest option.
And this gear is used when you're going into the hive, you're disturbing the hive. I know a lot of mornings I'll go and have a cup of coffee. I'll stand right next to my hives just watching the bees go in and out. So they're, on good days, especially on good days when I know it's nice and sunny and there's a honey flow, they're not interested in me.
That's right. The other essential pieces of equipment, you will need 2 things. One is a hive tool, because the bees are going to glue everything together. Those frames will not come out because they're going to be glued together. You need to use a little pry bar to get things out. Even to separate the boxes, you'll need this to open it up. It's called the hive tool. And the other thing is a smoker.
Must have.
The smoker is like a little firebox that blows smoke on the bees, and smoke has 2 effects on bees. One, when they smell smoke, they seem to react as if there's a forest fire. We might have to abandon the hive, so they fill up with honey. And when they're full of honey, they're sort of like in a food coma. They're going to slow right down. They're kind of stuffed like after having a Thanksgiving dinner, and they don't feel like stinging anybody. The other thing that smoker does is it blocks the transmission of one of those pheromones we've mentioned that is an alarm pheromone. So if any bee gets frightened or feels anxious or fearful that the beekeeper is a threat to the hive, she would release alarm pheromone to alert all the other bees of the danger. The smoker stops the spread of that alarm pheromone, keeps the bees nice and calm.
And again, when we say we smoke bees, we don't like blanket the whole thing and fill the whole hive with smoke. They get anywhere from 3 to 5 puffs of smoke to start that and to block that pheromone, start that process.
So in terms of cost of this sort of apparatus, a hive tool about $10, a smoker $30 to $40 upwards. A veil helmet combination, depending on what you're getting, $30 to $50 in that region. If you were getting a pair of gloves like this, a little over $20. The veil jacket combination, about $60, $70, $80, depending on the style that you're getting. And a full suit, maybe $110, $120. Again, depends on where you get them, the style that you get. You could be paying $400 for a really fancy one. I've never had one of those.
No, they get really dirty.
Yeah, and these bee suits, this will be the last time you see a bee suit as white as this.
Yep.
You're going to get it mucky.
Yep.
And you'll see some of in the videos coming up just how mucky some bee suits get. So don't worry about how pretty they look.
Okay, folks, so we've gone through the different types of bees and the equipment and the hive where they live. So let's talk a little bit now about locations. So I'll talk about where my primary hives are. I'm right in the city. I beekeep in an urban area. I have a relatively small backyard. It's fenced in, and I have 4 hives right in my backyard, and I have people walking by the back of my fence. They have no idea that they're even there. Yeah. And that just also goes to show you that, it's not like walking past a hornet's nest that they'll just come out and sting you.
Yeah, and a lot of folks make the mistake of thinking, I've got nothing in my yard to feed the bees. Right. Should I plant some flowers and that sort of thing? And you're talking about a half-acre property, a quarter-acre property. That's not going to make any difference to the bees at all. They're going to fly for 2 to 3 miles to find their food. They'll usually find it within the surrounding half mile, but they're going to fly for a radius of several miles around the hive in search of food if they need to. So, and there's places like in big cities and in San Francisco, stuff like that, they have rooftop hives where they have no yards, and they'll put it up on a roof, and they're very successful there. I actually had an opportunity to visit some rooftop hives in San Francisco, and it was pretty neat. But the big myth, and a lot of people that approach us, they're like, I don't have a yard, or I'm in the city, I can't keep bees. That's just not true. So location, what's important is there's other factors that are important with your locations. That's right. So regardless of whether you've got a big yard, a small yard, you're out in the countryside, in a field, or what have you, the more diverse the habitat, the better. An urban environment is very diverse, believe it or not. There's so many different potted plants and things in different yards, in hundreds of different yards. The bees actually do pretty well in that sort of environment. But there's about 5 different factors that you've got to take into consideration within any property that you have to optimize the best location. Number 1, bees love sun. They want as much sun as possible, particularly up here in the Northeast where we have cold winters and not particularly hot summers. And so we want as many hours of sunshine on them as possible. Now, if you're further south, you may want shade in the afternoon. But here in Maine, I prefer my hives to be in full sun all day long. If you're down in Florida, you'll want shade in the afternoon. That's the number 1 priority. Number 2 is shelter from the wind, particularly, again, if you're in an exposed or cold climate. You'll want to have protection from the dominant wind during the winter time. So here in Maine, we want to protect our hives from the northerly, northwesterly winds, which are very common during the winter months. And so if you've got a tree line to the north of your property, you can put your bees up against the trees, but still get sun from the south and east, terrific. That's the ideal scenario. I've seen plenty of hives in full shade all day, and they still do okay, but they do better if they get more sun and protection from the wind. The next thing to consider is how wet the environment or damp the environment is, because we want to avoid the hives getting in a permanently damp area. So that means low-lying muddy areas we want to avoid, or areas which are the last place for the mist to clear in the morning. If we've got a choice to avoid those areas, we will avoid several potential problems with fungal diseases like chalk brood and stone brood. So you also want to remember in an urban setting is on your location is you need to, for lack of a better phrase, be a good neighbor. On your urban settings, what's super, super important is that you have a water source close by. Now, it's important that they have a water source no matter where you're keeping your bees, but it's more important in the city to have a water source.
it's more important to have a water source nearby. I use a bird bath. If you don't have one nearby and your neighbors that have pools, that will become their water source. And trust me, your neighbors won't appreciate that.
Yeah, so basically that's, in my experience, that's been the only bone of contention between a beekeeper and their neighbors over their bees, is if the closest source of water for the bees is a swimming pool. So you can provide them with a closer water source as long as you keep it permanently filled. A bird bath, a kid's paddling splash pool or something like that, with sticks and stones in there so the bees don't drown when they go to get the water. That's the way to avoid them finding water sources a little further away, but they might be in conflict with the neighbors.
Right. And another thing is to, people saying, oh, I have a small backyard, a little backyard. They're afraid of the bees being all around their backyard, which also is not the case. And if you just give them a slight barrier, like I have an open picket fence, so they're not slatted all the way. That's just a few feet in front of my hive. So when my bees come out of their hive, they go up over that and they keep going up and they go treetop.
So now they're flying over your head as opposed to bumping into you right in front of the hive.
Right.
So it's basically, think of the front of the hive as like a little runway.
Yep.
And if there's no obstructions, the bees will fly low and straight out. But by putting a little fence there, you can deflect their flight path so they move upwards and out of harm's way, and people in the yard are not likely to be bumped into by the bees.
Yep. All right, so now we're going to move on to how to obtain your bees and where to get them.
The ideal is get them as locally as you can.
Absolutely.
Go to your local beekeeping supply store. You can get these things shipped through the mail. It's notoriously risky having these things shipped in the mail. You're far better off having your supplier undertake that risk for you and pick them up from a beekeeping supply store, or make the journey to a beekeeper who produces nukes. So let's talk about the two main ways that people will purchase bees. One is a package of bees and one is a nucleus colony of bees.
So this is what a package of bees look like. As you can see, it's a wooden frame. It's got some screening on it for plenty of ventilation, and you'll come and you'll have thousands of bees inside this package. Also included with this, inside here, will be your queen. Now your queen will be attached by this little strapping right here, and it'll be set down inside with all the other bees. Now she's kept in a cage because the queen with these package of bees did not come from this colony of bees. So she needs to be protected until the other bees get used to her and get used to her pheromones. So she's in this little cage right here. She's got a couple worker bees in there with her to keep her fed, but she'll be set down inside. When you get it, there's usually a nice can of sugar syrup, sort of food source for the bees when they arrive. And we're going to go a little bit in depth, a little bit further on how to actually install these, but this is how the package bee arrives.
So stores like mine will receive hundreds of these packages in a big delivery. And you can see in this video here the packages that are in the store with hundreds of these packages. Each package contains about 12,000 bees, which is enough to get it going. The thing about a package is that you're going to need to feed them as soon as they go in the hive, because you're putting only bees and a queen in the hive. If you're starting off a colony with just foundation, you need to feed them to keep them in good health. A package is typically less expensive than a nuke, typically about $150, but it might be over $200 depending on the race of bee that you get. A nucleus colony is a ready-built colony. It's already got a queen in here. You've got, and this particular, you can buy nukes of various sizes. This would be for a 5-frame nuke. So in other words, 5 combs are already in this box with brood, with honey, with bees. So there's still maybe 12 to 15,000 bees in a nucleus colony, but it's a going concern. The queen in here is the mother of the bees in the hive. So whereas with a package, we have to take time over installing the queen and having her be accepted by those bees, with a nuke, the queen bee is already accepted. There is no risk of losing the queen here by comparison. And so it is a going concern, and this is going to grow much, much faster. So inside this, we'll have 5 combs, all stocked with bees, brood of various stages, usually about 3 to 4 frames of brood, 2 frames of honey and pollen, and a little bit of room to expand.
So, and like this, these bees are just getting dumped into a hive where they haven't even begun to build the comb. In here, these frames are actually coming right out and going right into the hive, and they're already in full use.
Ready built, and usually there's food stores in there as well. So when you put that in the hive, there isn't the risk that they're going to starve to death all of a sudden, because usually there's a good supply of food already in this nuke. The thing you have to be on your toes about is this is going to grow way faster than this, because they've got to build their comb and then grow brood for several weeks before they increase in population. This box is increasing in population from the time you pick it up to the time you go home. You've probably got a few hundred more bees in it, because there's new bees emerging all the time.
Right.
So this one will outgrow that single story hive usually in 1 to 2 weeks, whereas this one will need to grow from a single to a double in roughly 4, maybe 5 weeks. Again, it depends on the weather, depends on circumstances. So one other thing about the nuke is that they will cost a fair bit more than a package, but you're getting a lot more for it. So nuke, depending on the race of bee, usually they're going to be about $190 to $250, depending on the race of bee, that sort of thing, and where you're getting them from. In terms of the choice between the two, for a beginner, I would always recommend going for a nuke if you can, because they're relatively problem-free. With the package, you're saving some money, but you are taking the risk that they reject the queen. It doesn't happen that much. It's certainly less than 20% of the time you're going to lose the queen, but they are very likely to replace the queen at some point in the next month or two, which just slows down the growth of the hive a little bit. Most people are perfectly successful in starting off with a package. It's a perfectly good way to start a hive, but given the choice, and if you've got the extra $30, $40 or so, I would always go with a nuke if you can.
All right, well, this concludes part 1 of our workshop. We hope you guys enjoyed it. And tomorrow we're going to get more into the actual bees and managing your bees and mite control and all that fun stuff.
That's right. So just to remind you, this is in this workshop, it is a very brief version of the things that you would expect to need to know in beekeeping.
Right.
It's not the detailed version by any means. That's the sort of thing we'd go into detail in Beekeeping 24/7.
Right.
But it's just to give you a taste of all the different aspects as best we can in the time we have available.
Right. All right, well, we hope you enjoyed that, and we'll see you on the next one. And don't forget to put any questions that you may have in the comments, and we'll get to them as soon as we can.